The moment a narcissist meets God's protected empath, something shifts, and they feel it before they understand it. At first, they're confident. They think this empath will be easy to control, easy to drain, easy to break like the others. But then nothing works. The usual tricks fall flat. The reactions they depend on never come. Instead of power, they feel resistance. Instead of control, they feel exposed. And that's when the trouble begins. Because a God-protected empath doesn't fight back loudly, they stand firm quietly. Their peace becomes unsettling. Their silence becomes loud. Their boundaries feel like invisible walls the narcissist keeps running into. What follows is confusion, frustration, and an inner collapse the narcissist can't explain to anyone. This isn't coincidence. This isn't luck. And it's definitely not weakness. There's a deeper reason these encounters always end the same way, and most people never notice it happening in real time. Stay with me till the end, because the final truth changes how you'll see every narcissist encounter forever. And if this already sounds familiar, let your voice be heard, drop a comment, share your experience, and tap subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. When a narcissist encounters a God-protected empath, the first thing that breaks is manipulation. The tactics that once worked, guilt-tripping, silent treatment, fear-based pressure, rewriting reality, suddenly lose their grip. The empath no longer rushes to explain, defend, or prove their worth. There is a calm pause where there used to be anxiety. There is clarity where confusion once lived. This shift unsettles the narcissist, because their sense of control depends on emotional reactions, not truth. A God-protected empath responds differently now. They listen, but they are not hooked. They observe, but they do not absorb. Gaslighting fails because the empath trusts their inner knowing more than external noise. Guilt fails because the empath understands that responsibility ends at healthy boundaries. Fear fails because faith has replaced the need for approval. What looks like passivity from the outside is actually grounded strength. The narcissist feels it immediately. Conversations stop flowing the way they used to. Provocations don't land. Emotional bait goes untouched. The empath's energy is no longer available for extraction. This is where frustration begins to build, because the narcissist cannot dominate what they cannot destabilize. Their words feel hollow. Their threats feel empty. Their charm feels forced. They try harder, then louder, then colder, but nothing restores the old power dynamic. Instead, every attempt exposes them further. The empath's steady presence becomes a mirror, reflecting the narcissist's insecurity, and that reflection is unbearable. Without reactions to feed on, the narcissist is left with themselves, and that silence is deeply uncomfortable. They may accuse the empath of changing, becoming distant, or acting superior, but the truth is simpler: the empath has become untouchable. Divine protection doesn't make the empath aggressive or arrogant. It makes them anchored. They no longer need to win, explain, or convince. They can walk away from emotional traps without drama. This quiet refusal to engage is what dismantles manipulation at its root. The narcissist senses the loss of influence and scrambles to regain it, often escalating behaviors that only reveal their desperation. Meanwhile, the empath remains composed, guided by discernment rather than emotion. This is not emotional numbness, it is emotional maturity. God's protection sharpens perception, strengthens boundaries, and restores self-trust. As a result, manipulation doesn't just fail, it backfires. The narcissist becomes exposed, frustrated, and internally shaken, while the empath grows clearer, calmer, and more secure. What once felt like a psychological chess game ends abruptly, not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a quiet shift in power. And in that shift, the narcissist realizes something unsettling: control is gone, access is denied, and the empath they once manipulated is no longer reachable on the same level. When a narcissist comes close to a God-protected empath, something strange happens inside them. They feel disarmed, even though no argument has started and no boundary has been spoken out loud. There is no confrontation, no raised voice, no visible pushback. Yet the narcissist senses resistance immediately. It's subtle but powerful, like walking toward a door that looks open but will not let them pass. This unsettles them because narcissists rely on dominance, psychological leverage, and emotional access. Around a protected empath, that access is quietly blocked. The empath doesn't challenge them directly, yet the narcissist feels watched, measured, and seen in a way that makes their usual confidence weaken. They can't quite read the empath, can't predict their reactions, can't pull emotional strings the way they normally do. This creates a deep inner discomfort. The narcissist may feel smaller without knowing why, as if their authority has evaporated in the presence of someone who isn't trying to compete. The empath's calm becomes threatening. Their grounded presence feels like a force field. It's not arrogance, and it's not defiance, it's alignment. God's protection doesn't announce itself loudly. It operates through clarity, discernment, and an unshakable sense of self. The narcissist senses that certain lines cannot be crossed, even though no warning has been given. This invisible boundary frustrates them, because they cannot fight what they cannot see. They may attempt to provoke, test limits, or subtly undermine the empath, but each attempt meets the same result. Nothing lands the way it's supposed to. The empath doesn't shrink. They don't over-explain. They don't react emotionally, and this lack of reaction feels like disarmament to the narcissist. Their psychological weapons, shame, confusion, intimidation, lose their sharpness. The narcissist may feel exposed, as if their inner motives are somehow obvious, even though nothing has been said aloud. This creates anxiety. They begin to feel spiritually off balance, restless, even irritated by the empath's peace. In some cases, they withdraw. In others, they escalate, trying harder to regain control. But the more they push, the clearer it becomes that they are not in charge here. The empath doesn't need to defend themselves because they are already defended. God's protection manifests as inner authority, not aggression. It makes the empath steady, observant, and emotionally unavailable to manipulation. This is deeply unsettling for a narcissist, whose sense of power depends on emotional dominance. In the presence of a protected empath, they are forced to confront a truth they avoid at all costs. Not everyone is accessible. Not everyone can be controlled, and not everyone is beneath them. That realization strips them of their confidence. They feel spiritually disarmed because they are. The empath stands quietly rooted, and without any visible struggle. The narcissist realizes they cannot cross this boundary, and that realization stays with them long after the encounter ends. When a narcissist encounters a God-protected empath, what unfolds is rarely loud or dramatic on the surface. To outsiders, the narcissist may appear composed, confident, even victorious. They may smile, posture, and perform as though nothing has touched them. But beneath that carefully managed exterior, something very different is happening. Instead of triumph, they experience inner chaos. The empath's calm presence begins to disturb them in ways they cannot explain or control. The peace the empath carries acts like a spotlight, illuminating the narcissist's internal disorder. Where the empath feels grounded, the narcissist feels unsettled. Where the empath is steady, the narcissist becomes restless. This contrast creates psychological and emotional pressure that no amount of public confidence can relieve. The narcissist is used to feeling superior through dominance, reaction, and emotional impact. When those elements are missing, their inner world starts to fracture. They may sleep poorly, feel constantly irritated, or experience a low-grade anxiety that never fully goes away. Even moments of apparent success feel hollow. The empath's peace becomes a silent reminder of what the narcissist lacks. This is not jealousy in the simple sense. It is discomfort rooted in inner emptiness. The narcissist may try to mask this turmoil by becoming more controlling, more critical, or more performative, but none of it restores the sense of power they once felt. Publicly, they may seem unaffected, but privately they are spinning. Their thoughts loop. Their emotions fluctuate. They feel agitated without a clear cause. The empath's stability makes their own instability impossible to ignore. God's protection doesn't attack the narcissist, it simply removes illusion. Without emotional chaos to feed on, the narcissist is left alone with unresolved insecurity, fear, and self-doubt. This internal exposure is deeply uncomfortable for someone who relies on external validation to regulate their sense of self. They may attempt to provoke the empath into reacting, hoping to restore the familiar dynamic, but the empath's calm only deepens the contrast. Silence becomes louder than words. Peace becomes more powerful than confrontation. The narcissist begins to feel internally disorganized. Their thoughts race, but solutions don't come. Their confidence feels forced rather than natural. Even praise from others fails to soothe them for long. This inner unrest often leads to irritability. Small things trigger disproportionate reactions. They may lash out unexpectedly or withdraw without explanation. The empath, meanwhile, remains steady, not because they are unaffected, but because they are anchored. God's protection stabilizes the empath's inner world, making them less reactive and more discerning. This stability is not passive, it is active alignment, and alignment exposes disorder. The narcissist may sense that the empath is not competing, not judging, not trying to win, and that realization unsettles them further. Without a visible enemy, the narcissist's inner conflict has nowhere to go. They cannot project it outward effectively, so it turns inward instead. This is where inner chaos takes root. The narcissist may replay conversations in their mind, searching for moments where they lost control or influence. They may obsess over the empath's calm, interpreting it as indifference, superiority, or hidden judgment. In reality, it is simply peace, but peace feels threatening to someone whose identity depends on tension. Over time, this internal instability grows. The narcissist may experience mood swings, impatience, or a sense of being spiritually off balance. They may feel disconnected from themselves without knowing why, even when they appear to win. Socially or professionally, the satisfaction fades quickly. There is no inner victory, only temporary distraction. The empath's peace continues to act as a quiet mirror, reflecting what the narcissist avoids facing. God's protection ensures that this process does not harm the empath. Instead, it reveals the truth of the dynamic. The empath does not need to argue, explain, or defend themselves. Their calm presence is enough to expose imbalance. The narcissist's inner chaos is not caused by the empath, it is revealed by them. This distinction matters. The empath is not taking anything away. They are simply no longer participating in dysfunction. And when dysfunction loses its audience, it becomes painfully visible to the one creating it. The narcissist may feel increasingly unstable while insisting outwardly that everything is fine. This disconnect between appearance and reality creates further tension. They may overcompensate with grand gestures or exaggerated confidence, but the inner unrest persists. Meanwhile, the empath experiences clarity, not confusion. They sense the shift without needing to analyze it. God's protection provides emotional safety and spiritual grounding, allowing the empath to remain calm even as the narcissist unravels internally. This is the true consequence the narcissist faces, not public humiliation, not dramatic loss, but the slow realization that they are internally disordered in the presence of someone who is whole. The empath's peace does not attack, it contrasts, and that contrast is what creates big trouble for the narcissist, because it reveals a truth they cannot escape. Outer appearances mean nothing when the inner world is in chaos, and no performance can hide disorder forever. When a narcissist encounters a God-protected empath and realizes control is no longer possible, the situation reaches a breaking point. Narcissists thrive on influence, on shaping perceptions, steering emotions, and maintaining a carefully managed image. When that influence disappears, they are left with only two options: exposure or withdrawal. Neither choice serves them well. This is where their power erodes, not through confrontation, but through inevitability. The empath's grounded presence removes the narcissist's ability to operate behind masks. Without emotional leverage, The narcissist cannot manipulate outcomes quietly. They are forced into visibility or silence, and both outcomes undermine the authority they rely on. Exposure happens when the narcissist keeps pushing. Unable to tolerate loss of control, they escalate behaviors in an attempt to reassert dominance. Subtle manipulation turns into obvious tactics. Charm becomes forceful. Calmness gives way to irritation. Inconsistencies surface. The empath does not provoke this exposure. It emerges naturally because false personas cannot survive without cooperation. God's protection creates an environment where truth rises without effort. The empath's neutrality removes the narcissist's cover. As pressure builds, the narcissist begins to contradict themselves, overreact publicly, or behave in ways that draw attention. People who once admired them start to notice patterns. Allies become uncertain. Trust weakens. The narcissist may feel betrayed by their own behavior, not realizing that the empath's refusal to engage has simply removed the buffer that once hid their instability. Withdrawal, on the other hand, is chosen when the narcissist senses exposure is inevitable. Retreat becomes a strategy to preserve image. They distance themselves, disengage abruptly, or disappear emotionally. This withdrawal is often framed as indifference or superiority, but internally it is avoidance. The narcissist knows they can no longer control the empath or the narrative around them. By stepping back, they attempt to regain a sense of power through absence. But this too backfires. Silence raises questions. Sudden distance feels suspicious. The empath does not chase or react, which removes the narcissist's sense of importance. Without emotional pursuit, withdrawal loses its impact. Instead of appearing strong, the narcissist appears evasive. Influence fades quietly as attention shifts elsewhere. Both exposure and withdrawal damage the narcissist's image, because their power depends on consistency and perception. Exposure reveals cracks. Withdrawal creates gaps. In either case, the empath remains unaffected. God's protection ensures that the empath does not need to explain or defend their stance. Their calm becomes a stabilizing force that contrasts sharply with the narcissist's instability. This contrast is what others notice most. The empath appears steady and self-directed, while the narcissist appears reactive or distant. Over time, this shift changes how both are perceived. What makes this dynamic particularly unsettling for the narcissist is that it is self-inflicted. The empath does not attack or expose. They simply stop participating in dysfunction. Without engagement, the narcissist cannot maintain illusions. Every attempt to regain control pushes them closer to visibility or isolation. They may try to rewrite the story, casting themselves as misunderstood or wronged, but without the empath's emotional response, these narratives fall flat. The empath's silence is not agreement, it is disengagement, and disengagement deprives the narcissist of relevance. God's protection also alters timing. Exposure or withdrawal often happens sooner than the narcissist expects. What once took months or years to surface emerges quickly. This acceleration creates panic. The narcissist may feel rushed, pressured, or out of sync. Their usual ability to manage impressions weakens. They become more transparent under stress. Alternatively, they retreat prematurely, leaving unfinished narratives that raise suspicion. In both cases, influence erodes. For the empath, this stage brings clarity rather than confusion. They see that control was the foundation of the relationship, not connection. Once control is removed, there is nothing left to negotiate. God's protection provides the empath with emotional safety, allowing them to remain composed regardless of the narcissist's choice. They do not celebrate exposure or fear withdrawal. They simply continue forward, anchored in self-respect. This neutrality deprives the narcissist of leverage. There is no reaction to exploit, no explanation to twist. The narcissist may attempt one final push, an emotional appeal, a public display, or a strategic silence to test whether access can be restored. When it fails, the outcome becomes clear. Either their behavior is seen for what it is, or their absence diminishes their relevance. Both outcomes threaten the narcissist's core need for control and admiration. Influence depends on engagement, and engagement is no longer available. Over time, exposure reshapes reputation. People notice patterns and distance themselves. Withdrawal reshapes dynamics as attention moves elsewhere. The narcissist may attempt to recover by seeking new sources of validation, but the loss of influence with the empath remains unresolved. The empath's calm departure becomes a quiet benchmark, a moment others reference when evaluating the narcissist's behavior. This is not revenge, it is consequence. When control is removed, truth or absence must fill the space. In the end, being forced into exposure or withdrawal is the narcissist's greatest trouble. It strips them of the ability to operate unseen. God's protection ensures that the empath is not harmed by this process. Instead, the empath gains clarity, freedom, and stability. The narcissist loses image and influence because both depended on access that no longer exists. And in that quiet conclusion, the power dynamic resolves itself, not through conflict, but through the natural outcome of disengagement and truth. When a narcissist comes face to face with a God-protected empath, one of the most devastating realizations for them is the sudden awareness that they are no longer chosen. Narcissists thrive on hierarchy, on being seen as superior, desirable, or indispensable. Their self-worth is intricately tied to the perception that others depend on them, admire them, or need their validation. When a God-protected empath enters their sphere, this sense of superiority begins to crumble in ways that the narcissist cannot easily articulate or control. The empath, grounded in divine protection, carries an energy and presence that transcends manipulation, charm, or coercion. This is not about arrogance or competition, it is about alignment. The empath is aligned with truth, purpose, and self-respect, and this alignment radiates in ways the narcissist cannot ignore. To someone who measures their value by influence and control, this realization is disorienting. Suddenly, they are confronted with a reality where they no longer occupy the top position in the dynamic. The empath is no longer accessible for manipulation or emotional feeding, and this absence of access triggers a deep sense of inadequacy. As the narcissist recognizes that the empath carries spiritual favor, an invisible shield of protection, discernment, and clarity, their internal reaction is immediate and intense. They may initially try to rationalize it, thinking the empath is merely lucky, naive, or unusually compliant. But over time, they cannot deny the truth. The empath's strength is inherent and untouchable. The narcissist may notice how easily the empath navigates challenges, how calm they remain under pressure, and how others are drawn to their clarity and presence. These observations fuel jealousy because they contradict the narcissist's worldview. In their mind, being chosen or admired is a form of currency, a sign of dominance, and a measure of personal significance. When the empath clearly occupies that position, whether in social circles, spiritual perception, or personal interactions, the narcissist experiences the painful awareness that they are no longer central, no longer necessary, and no longer privileged. This shift undermines their ego at a foundational level. The feelings of jealousy and insecurity intensify as the narcissist continues to observe the empath. They may try to downplay the empath's significance in their own mind, labeling them as overly proud, manipulative, or self-righteous, but these rationalizations are shallow. Deep down, the narcissist is aware that the empath's influence comes from authenticity rather than performance, and authenticity cannot be countered with charm, intimidation, or deceit. Every interaction becomes a reminder that the narcissist no longer holds the power they once wielded. Their usual methods of maintaining hierarchy, control, manipulation, gaslighting, or emotional coercion fail to shift the dynamic. The empath's inner alignment acts as a natural defense against these tactics, leaving the narcissist exposed to their own sense of inadequacy. This realization often drives the narcissist to escalate their behavior, but these efforts are usually counterproductive. In an attempt to reclaim the sense of being chosen, they may become louder, more controlling, or more dramatic, hoping to provoke a reaction that will reestablish dominance. They may attempt to belittle the empath, compete openly for attention, or create scenarios where they can assert superiority. Yet, all these actions tend to backfire. The empath's calm and clarity remain intact, and their refusal to engage in the narcissist's games only highlights the narcissist's insecurity. This lack of access to emotional leverage, combined with the empath's visible spiritual favor, creates a feedback loop where the narcissist feels increasingly powerless. They are confronted with a stark truth. The hierarchy they once controlled has shifted, and the empath is now elevated in ways they cannot influence. As this awareness deepens, the narcissist may also experience social and emotional repercussions. Others may recognize the empath's strength, wisdom, or grounded presence, which further reinforces the shift in perception. People may seek the empath for guidance, reassurance, or leadership, roles the narcissist had previously assumed or expected to occupy. The narcissist notices these dynamics, often with a mixture of envy and panic. They feel displaced, not because they have lost in a tangible way, but because the relational and spiritual hierarchy has realigned. The empath's presence exposes the narcissist's dependence on external validation, highlighting the fragility of their ego and their reliance on perceived superiority for self-esteem. In some cases, the narcissist may attempt to undermine the empath, spreading rumors, questioning their credibility, or manipulating situations to regain a sense of dominance. However, because the empath is protected, these attempts rarely succeed. God's favor, whether understood consciously or intuitively by the narcissist, shields the empath from harm, while making the narcissist's failures more apparent. The more the narcissist struggles to reassert control, the more evident their displacement becomes. Every attempt to reclaim a chosen status only amplifies their insecurity and frustration. They are caught between wanting recognition and being unable to secure it, trapped by the very hierarchy they once assumed they commanded. Ultimately, the narcissist's awareness that the empath is now the chosen one forces them to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves. Their self-worth, previously tied to influence and manipulation, is now revealed as hollow. They experience envy, insecurity, and even self-doubt in ways that feel threatening, because the empath embodies what the narcissist cannot access: alignment, authenticity, and divine favor. In the presence of a God-protected empath, the narcissist realizes that influence, charm, and control are no longer the measures of value they once were. They are displaced in a way that is quiet but profound. The empath does not seek to dominate or humiliate. They simply exist fully, calmly, and protected. And in that quiet existence, the narcissist feels the stark truth: they are no longer chosen, and the empath, anchored in divine protection, holds the position they desperately wanted. The realization creates a profound internal shift, often leading to frustration, withdrawal, or exposure, as the narcissist grapples with a hierarchy they can no longer control. The empath's elevation is natural, effortless, and undeniable, leaving the narcissist to confront the truth of their own limitations in a way that nothing else can. When a narcissist encounters a God-protected empath, one of the most powerful and destabilizing forces they face is divine timing. Narcissists are masters of planning, manipulation, and strategic control. They carefully construct scenarios, predict reactions, and orchestrate outcomes in ways that feed their sense of superiority and power. They rely on timing, opportunity, and calculated influence to maintain dominance, whether in relationships, social circles, or professional settings. But when a God-protected empath is involved, divine timing intervenes in ways the narcissist cannot anticipate, control, or counter. Plans that were meticulously crafted begin to unravel unexpectedly. Opportunities vanish. Missteps appear where none should exist. Allies who seemed loyal or predictable pull away at critical moments. Lies that once went unnoticed or unchallenged surface in ways that disrupt carefully built narratives. All of this occurs without direct confrontation. God's protection does not need to strike overtly. It works quietly through timing, alignment, and the natural unfolding of events. The narcissist, accustomed to controlling outcomes, is immediately unsettled by this disruption. They are used to having people and situations bend to their will, to timing that reinforces their authority, and to reactions that feed their ego. When plans collapse without warning, they feel frustrated, confused, and powerless. They may try to recalibrate, to adjust their strategies, or to manipulate circumstances to regain control. But the rhythm of divine timing ensures that their efforts are thwarted. Every move feels slightly off, every conversation slightly misaligned, and every calculated attempt to influence or manipulate falls short. This is a form of subtle chaos that deeply unsettles the narcissist because it exposes their reliance on external control. Where they once felt omnipotent in social or emotional dynamics, they now feel vulnerable and reactive. The unpredictability of outcomes, orchestrated by a force beyond their comprehension, highlights the limits of their power. Divine timing also has a way of revealing truths that the narcissist intended to conceal. Lies that were hidden or carefully constructed to manipulate perceptions emerge naturally, without the empath needing to confront or expose anything. A miscommunication, an overlooked detail, or an unforeseen coincidence may bring their deception into the light. Similarly, allies or enablers who were strategically positioned to support the narcissist may withdraw at critical moments, either because they recognize the truth or because divine timing aligns circumstances to reveal loyalty or dishonesty. The narcissist is left scrambling to maintain influence, unaware that the collapse of their network is not random, but part of a higher orchestration that protects the empath. The empath's presence is not active in creating these disruptions. Their alignment, clarity, and divine protection simply act as a stabilizing force that highlights the gaps and cracks in the narcissist's plans. The effect on the narcissist is cumulative. Initially, they may dismiss the disruptions as coincidences or errors in judgment. They may attempt to blame others or manipulate outcomes to restore the expected flow. But as timing continues to work against them, frustration grows. The inability to control events exposes the fragility of their carefully constructed reality. The more they push, the more they encounter resistance, not from the empath directly, but from the alignment of events and circumstances that favor truth and protection over manipulation and deceit. This creates inner tension and unrest that the narcissist struggles to manage. They may feel a sense of being blocked at every turn, unable to predict outcomes or secure the responses they once relied on. The unpredictability becomes exhausting, intensifying feelings of anxiety, irritation, and insecurity. At the same time, divine timing empowers the empath. While the narcissist scrambles to regain control, the empath moves through life grounded, calm, and confident. Their alignment with God's protection ensures that they are present in the right places at the right times, making decisions that reinforce their own stability rather than responding reactively to the narcissist. The empath's choices, timing, and presence act like a shield, naturally disrupting manipulation without confrontation. They do not need to strategize against the narcissist or actively oppose them. Their very alignment with divine order prevents the narcissist from maintaining influence. This dynamic forces the narcissist to confront the limits of their control in ways they are not used to experiencing. Over time, the narcissist's strategies repeatedly fail. Plans that seemed foolproof collapse in ways that appear sudden, but are actually the natural outcome of divine orchestration. Lies unravel through exposure or coincidence, revealing the narcissist's true character. Allies may withdraw, either by choice or circumstance, leaving the narcissist isolated and more vulnerable. Each failure chips away at their confidence, their sense of superiority, and their perception of inevitability. What they once controlled through careful planning now controls them, creating a sense of being trapped in their own failing schemes. The more they attempt to regain leverage, the more evident the disruption becomes, reinforcing the truth that they cannot dictate outcomes when divine protection is at play. The emotional impact of divine timing is profound. Narcissists may feel increasingly frustrated, restless, and desperate. They may lash out, attempt to manipulate alternative avenues of influence, or escalate efforts to control situations. Yet all of it meets resistance in ways they cannot predict or overcome. The internal tension grows because their usual tools, fear, guilt, manipulation, charm, are insufficient in the face of alignment and divine order. The narcissist's perception of power is undermined by the natural flow of events that favor truth and protection. Their plans, which once seemed reliable, now collapse in ways that feel chaotic and threatening, yet are perfectly ordered within the framework of divine timing. Meanwhile, the empath continues to experience clarity and stability. They are grounded in decisions, protected from manipulation, and aligned with outcomes that serve their well-being. God's timing ensures that the empath is never overexposed to the narcissist's schemes. The disruptions that unsettle the narcissist often go unnoticed by the empath because they are anchored in trust, discernment, and divine protection. The narcissist, however, feels each collapse as a personal failure, a loss of control, and a threat to their ego. The more the narcissist resists this timing, the more obvious it becomes that they cannot dictate outcomes, and that they are not chosen in this dynamic. The empath's protected state amplifies the contrast between internal chaos and external calm. In the end, divine timing works against the narcissist not through direct conflict, but through natural orchestration that exposes lies, removes leverage, and dismantles control. Plans that were meticulously crafted fail, Deceptions unravel. Allies drift away. Every attempt to restore influence meets subtle resistance. The narcissist may appear composed outwardly, but internally they experience confusion, frustration, and insecurity. The empath, aligned with divine protection, remains steady, anchored, and untouched by manipulation. The outcome is inevitable. The narcissist's strategies collapse while the empath thrives, not because of confrontation, but because timing itself is aligned to protect, reveal, and stabilize. In this quiet yet powerful way, God's timing ensures that truth prevails, control shifts, and the narcissist is left to confront their limitations in ways that nothing else could accomplish. When a narcissist encounters a God-protected empath and their manipulations fail, it might feel like the conflict is over. But in reality, the final trouble for the narcissist isn't a loud confrontation or an immediate loss. It's the quiet, undeniable contrast that emerges over time. The empath walks away stronger, not because they fought or proved a point, but because they aligned with clarity, confidence, and purpose. In contrast, the narcissist remains trapped in the same cycles they've always known: manipulation, control, frustration, and insecurity. This contrast is invisible to the casual observer, yet it is profoundly destabilizing for the narcissist. They measure the world through influence, dominance, and reaction. And when the empath no longer reacts, when the empath no longer validates or absorbs their emotional games, the narcissist is left facing the emptiness of their own patterns. The empath's strength is quiet but radiant. It is the kind of power that does not scream, argue, or demand recognition, yet it commands attention simply through presence and alignment. God's protection enhances this, granting the empath discernment, resilience, and emotional sovereignty. They are no longer tethered to the narcissist's energy, no longer vulnerable to the emotional manipulation that once defined the relationship, and no longer dependent on external validation to navigate life. Each step the empath takes is guided by purpose, and each decision reinforces autonomy, boundaries, and self-respect. This rising clarity is the exact opposite of the narcissist state, and it is what creates the final trouble. The narcissist, on the other hand, is stuck. Their sense of self is tied to perception, control, and the reactions of others. When these reactions no longer feed them, their inner world becomes chaotic. They may attempt to regain influence, escalate attempts at intimidation, or manipulate situations to provoke responses. But each effort is met with the empath's calm absence or unshakable boundaries. Instead of moving forward, the narcissist cycles through the same behaviors that once worked but now fail spectacularly. They obsess over the empath, replay interactions, and analyze every perceived slight or missed opportunity, searching for ways to reclaim lost dominance. This endless repetition, this inability to evolve, creates an internal trap that the narcissist cannot escape. Where the empath grows with every step, the narcissist stagnates in frustration. They remain enslaved to patterns they cannot break, while the empath flourishes outside their sphere of control. The contrast between the empath and the narcissist is further amplified because growth is visible and cumulative. The empath, freed from manipulation, experiences a rise in confidence that is both internal and visible to others. They make decisions from discernment rather than fear, act from alignment rather than impulse, and pursue life from a place of integrity rather than performance. Each choice reinforces their autonomy, strengthens boundaries, and expands their sense of purpose. The narcissist, by contrast, is trapped in repetition. Every failed manipulation, every attempt at intimidation, Every misaligned strategy reinforces the awareness of lost control, yet they are unable to learn or adapt effectively. They remain emotionally reactive, spiritually unsettled, and psychologically dependent on others for validation. This contrast is psychologically agonizing because narcissists cannot tolerate witnessing a rise that they did not create or control. Even in social contexts, the disparity becomes evident. People around the empath notice their grounded presence, clarity of thought, and calm confidence. The empath's decisions and actions are aligned with integrity, while the narcissist's responses appear erratic, desperate, or manipulative. The more the empath thrives, the more visible the narcissist's stagnation becomes. Allies and observers unconsciously pick up on this difference, reinforcing the narcissist's sense of irrelevance and loss. Attempts to regain admiration or control only deepen the contrast. Every failed tactic, every unprovoked withdrawal by the empath, every time the narcissist attempts to manipulate outcomes but meets silence or refusal, compounds their internal turmoil. The empath's rise is not about superiority or competition. It is about alignment with divine protection, personal growth, and clarity of purpose. They walk away not to hurt, shame, or humiliate, but because they recognize that continuing to engage would drain their energy without providing value or growth. Each step away is deliberate, grounded, and measured. Each step reinforces self-respect and trust in their own judgment. Their calm detachment becomes a mirror, reflecting the narcissist's disarray back at them without a word. This mirror is not malicious, it is natural consequence. The narcissist is forced to face what they cannot manipulate: the presence of someone who has moved beyond their influence, someone whose life progresses with clarity and purpose. Internal patterns of the narcissist intensify as the empath grows. They may become obsessed with why they lost influence, fixated on perceived slights, or consumed by the empath's apparent success. They may attempt to reinsert themselves into the empath's life through subtle manipulation, social pressure, or indirect communication, but each effort is met with the empath's continued alignment and boundaries. The more the empath rises, the more obvious it becomes that the narcissist cannot replicate this growth because it is rooted in discernment, integrity, and divine favor, qualities that cannot be forced or fabricated. The empath's strength is a natural byproduct of protection and self-alignment. The narcissist's weakness is a natural byproduct of dependence on control and validation. Spiritually, the difference is even more stark. The empath moves in faith, guided by intuition, alignment, and divine timing. Each choice is supported by clarity, reinforcing confidence and purpose. The narcissist, on the other hand, operates in fear, anxiety, and illusion. Every attempt to reclaim lost influence is undermined by internal chaos and misalignment with truth. The more they push, the more evident it becomes that they are trapped in cycles of their own making. Divine protection ensures that the empath's growth is smooth, natural, and unshakable, while the narcissist's stagnation is loud, chaotic, and visible even when hidden behind outward appearances. Ultimately, the final trouble for the narcissist is the inescapable contrast. It is not a dramatic confrontation or an immediate loss that devastates them. It is the long, quiet unfolding of difference. The empath gains clarity, confidence, and purpose with each passing day. They set boundaries, cultivate self-trust, and engage with life from a place of strength rather than fear. The narcissist remains reactive, frustrated, and trapped, cycling through old patterns, unable to generate growth or sustain influence. The empath's rise is effortless, The narcissist's struggle is relentless. The contrast is clear to anyone who observes the dynamic. But most importantly, it is undeniable to the narcissists themselves. They are forced to see what they cannot touch, control, or reverse. The empath has grown beyond them. In the end, the empath walking away stronger signals the ultimate shift of power. It is quiet, unassuming, and irreversible. The narcissist, left in repetition and internal chaos, faces the consequences of a reliance on manipulation and control. The empath's rise is proof that alignment, faith, and divine protection are far more powerful than fear, intimidation, or deceit. And while the narcissist remains trapped in cycles that they cannot break, the empath moves forward, stronger, wiser, and anchored in clarity and purpose. The contrast is not just a difference in behavior, it is a difference in being, and it is the final trouble the narcissist cannot overcome. When a narcissist encounters a God-protected empath, one of the most destabilizing changes happens quietly. The energy supply they depend on is cut off. Narcissists survive on emotional reactions, attention, validation, admiration, fear, confusion, even anger. Any strong response reassures them that they matter, that they are powerful, that they can still influence someone's inner world. A God-protected empath no longer provides this fuel. They don't over-explain, over-react, or emotionally perform. They don't chase approval or try to fix misunderstandings that were never accidental. Their responses become calm, measured, and minimal. This is not coldness, it is discernment. And to a narcissist, it feels like starvation. At first, the narcissist may not understand what's happening. They sense a change but assume it's temporary. They test familiar tactics, provocation, charm, guilt, subtle insults, expecting the empath to react the way they once did. But the reactions never come. The empath listens without absorbing, speaks without defending, and disengages without drama. This absence of emotional supply creates discomfort almost immediately. Without constant validation, the narcissist's inner emptiness becomes louder. Their sense of self, which relies on external feedback, starts to wobble. They may feel restless, uneasy, or inexplicably irritated. What once energized them now feels flat and ineffective. God's protection doesn't harden the empath, it stabilizes them. Their nervous system is no longer regulated by another person's moods or approval. They are anchored internally, which means the narcissist can no longer plug into them for emotional regulation. This loss triggers internal spiraling. The narcissist may become preoccupied with the empath, replaying interactions in their mind, searching for a way to regain influence. They may accuse the empath of being distant, changed, or ungrateful, projecting their discomfort outward. But none of this restores the lost supply. Without emotional reactions to feed on, the narcissist's inner world becomes chaotic. Thoughts race, mood swings intensify. They may seek validation elsewhere, but it feels weaker, less satisfying, because the empath once provided deep emotional engagement. The empath's former empathy, patience, and responsiveness were rich fuel. Now that fuel is gone. God-protected empaths no longer pour energy into people who misuse it. Their silence is not punishment, it is protection. This creates a sharp contrast. The empath grows clearer, calmer, and more self-directed, while the narcissist grows more internally unsettled. Publicly, the narcissist may still appear confident, but privately they feel unmoored. Praise doesn't land the same. Attention doesn't satisfy. Distractions don't last. The lack of supply forces them to confront feelings they avoid: emptiness, insecurity, insignificance. Instead of self-reflection, many narcissists spiral. They may become more irritable, impulsive, or dramatic. Some escalate behavior to provoke a reaction, others withdraw and brood. Either way, the internal instability deepens. The empath, meanwhile, does not feel the urge to re-engage. God's protection brings clarity about where energy belongs. The empath learns that not every emotion needs to be shared, and not every conflict needs to be resolved. This boundary is devastating to a narcissist because it removes access without explanation. There is no argument to win, no scene to dominate, no emotional storm to harvest. The narcissist may feel invisible in the empath's presence, which triggers deep discomfort. Their identity, built on being impactful and central, begins to crack. The loss of emotional supply also disrupts their sense of timing and control. They no longer know how to pull the empath back in. This uncertainty breeds anxiety. They may attempt grand gestures or subtle manipulation, but each attempt falls flat. God's protection ensures that the empath's energy is no longer reactive. Peace replaces urgency. Discernment replaces impulse. Over time, the narcissist's internal spiral becomes harder to hide. Irritation turns into bitterness. Restlessness turns into agitation. They may speak negatively about the empath to regain a sense of power, but it doesn't soothe the internal ache. The truth is simple and unsettling. The empath has stopped feeding the dynamic, and without that nourishment, it collapses. This is not revenge, it is consequence. When emotional energy is no longer available for misuse, the imbalance becomes obvious. The empath doesn't need to confront or expose. Their withdrawal of energy is enough. God's protection restores the empath's self-trust and redirects their focus inward, where peace grows. The narcissist, deprived of validation and attention, is left facing their own instability. That is where the spiral begins, not because the empath did something cruel, but because they stopped doing what was harming them. And in that quiet shift, the narcissist learns a painful truth. Without someone else's emotional energy to sustain them, their inner world has nothing solid to stand on. When a narcissist realizes that manipulation no longer works and emotional supply has been cut off, they often escalate to intimidation. This is the stage where they attempt to dominate through fear, pressure, or subtle threats. In the past, these tactics may have shaken the empath, creating self-doubt or compliance. But when the empath is God-protected, intimidation does not have the intended effect. Instead of weakening the empath, it activates clarity, resolve, and spiritual grounding. What was once frightening now feels revealing. The narcissist's attempts to overpower expose desperation rather than authority, and that shift changes everything. A God-protected empath does not confuse loudness with strength. They sense when intimidation is being used as a control mechanism rather than a genuine boundary. Because of this discernment, fear does not take root. The empath may feel the pressure, but they are not governed by it. Their nervous system no longer responds with panic or urgency. Instead, it responds with awareness. This calm awareness unsettles the narcissist deeply. Intimidation relies on emotional imbalance. When there is no imbalance to exploit, the tactic collapses on itself. Narcissists often use intimidation to reclaim power when their influence is threatened. This can take many forms: raised voices, ultimatums, passive-aggressive warnings, social pressure, or silent punishment meant to instill fear. Around a God-protected empath, these methods lose their impact. The empath no longer internalizes blame or fear. They understand that intimidation says more about the one using it than the one receiving it. Rather than shrinking, the empath becomes more resolved. Their boundaries sharpen. Their sense of self becomes clearer. What was meant to dominate instead reinforces their commitment to distance and self-respect. Divine protection changes the way fear is processed. The empath no longer sees threats as signals of danger, but as confirmation of misalignment. Intimidation becomes evidence that the narcissist has lost control. This realization is empowering. The empath stops questioning their perception and starts trusting it fully. God's protection does not remove challenges, it removes confusion. And without confusion, intimidation has no foothold. As the narcissist pushes harder, the backfire becomes more visible. Their behavior grows more erratic. They may attempt to assert authority through social standing, financial leverage, or emotional withdrawal. None of it restores dominance. Instead, it highlights insecurity. The empath sees clearly that these tactics are rooted in fear of losing influence. This clarity strengthens their resolve to disengage. They no longer feel the need to explain, defend, or soften their stance. Silence becomes intentional rather than fearful. Distance becomes protective rather than avoidant. What's most unsettling for the narcissist is that the empath does not retaliate. There is no dramatic reaction, no emotional explosion, no counterattack. The empath simply stands firm. This firmness is not stubbornness, it is alignment. God's protection anchors the empath in truth rather than emotion. They know who they are, what they tolerate, and what they will no longer participate in. Intimidation, instead of breaking them, confirms that they are on the right path. Over time, the narcissist begins to sense that every attempt to intimidate only widens the gap. Each threat reinforces the empath's boundaries. Each power move strengthens their detachment. This creates frustration and inner conflict for the narcissist.